order. It's the May 3rd, 2022 meeting. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I miss Frank Hotchkiss. I could never hear myself say that when Hotchkiss was next to me, that booming voice is. Would you call the roll, please, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Snedden.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez. Councilmember Jordan. Here. And Mayor Rouse.
Here. All right, I think we have a ceremonial item. Madam Administrator, do we have?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Yes, we do. We have our employee recognition, and this is the time where we like to recognize those employees who are having service anniversaries. And today we have, with 10 years, Marianne Wetzel, Senior Real Property Agent in Public Works Department, John McCoy, Senior Wastewater Collection System Operator in the Public Works Department, Viviani Bear, Custodian at the airport, and with 15 years, Michelle Bedard, Associate Transportation Planner in the Public Works Department, Adam Muntz, Wastewater Treatment Supervisor in the Public Works Department, Lorraine Cruz Carpenter, Environmental Services Supervisor in the Sustainability and Resilience Department. With 20 years, we have Roy Forney, our Parking Supervisor in Public Works Department, and with 25 years, we have Christy Prince, Administrative Specialist in the Police Department.
Thank you, and congratulations to all our employees on that achievement. Are there changes to the agenda?
Mayor Rouse, there are no changes.
Okay, then we'll move to public comment, and I have one person here present, Lucy O'Brien. You have 3 minutes, please.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I am happily bringing you some bounty from the Yananoli Gardens. So please enjoy and share. And if anybody took up Robbie's challenge a while ago to grow the biggest beet, we have one in here that says is a monster beet. So I'm very happy to come and thank you for your support in this matter. When I last spoke with you, it was stop the gate, the fence. And the fence has been not put up yet. There is a compromise proposal or a compromise plan. We're not really sure how hard and fast that compromise is, but it was a great movement from the Parks Department. So we do ask your support that at least that compromise be put in place. Some gardeners would like a little more leeway, but we at least want to hold with what they have proposed. The current activity that's going on right now is the survey is out from the Parks Department to the public, and they're sending it out to all members who signed the petition, so we'll have 800 or so responses, hopefully. The first question is, are you a member of Yananoli or the Ranchita Gardens? So we ask that those gardeners who are responding be given a little more weight than the general public. Just if that's at all possible, and that there be transparency with the results of the survey so that things can be weighed. One of the questions they did respond to our request was that a master gardener be included in the process, which we totally agree to. The way the question is written, a master gardener is certainly better than somebody, a road builder, but it doesn't say or exclude someone from the Yananoli Gardens. So we would like to just make sure that even though there's overwhelming success, that yes, we all want a master gardener, which we do, we don't want to be excluded. So it's a work in progress, but please enjoy the bounty from the garden. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. I'd like to also extend kudos to our department for being cooperative and working with all the gardeners and the public on that one. Do we have somebody online that wants to speak?
We have one hand raised.
Okay.
Kate Connell, you are unmuted and can go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, this is a little tricky, but
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Kate Connell, and like Lucy, I have a garden plot at Yan Alley Garden. I've had one there since 2009. Thank you, Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Sneddon, for meeting with and talking with the gardeners on site at Yan Alley Garden earlier this year. And also thank you to Oscar Gutierrez and Mike Jordan for coming to an on-site meeting with the Parks and Recreation staff along with the gardeners. We have asked to meet with Alejandra Gutierrez, the city's Parks and Recreation Commission liaison to the council, but so far have not been successful in meeting with her. And I hope that we can get together with her, hopefully on site at the garden, because it's really important for you all to see the garden itself. It's looking great right now, full of weeds. The proposed changes to the garden plans are often described as improvements, but improve is a subjective term, and the gardeners don't see reducing the garden's overall size as an improvement. And as of now, the East Side Park Gardens permitted plans still remove about 20 plots from the garden. After the gardeners mounted a campaign, including a petition that Lucy referenced, signed by over 80 community members and allies, Parks and Recreation proposed a draft of a new plan which kept some of the plots but still cut down the garden size unnecessarily. Parks and Recreation recently sent out a survey for input on the changes to Yan Alley and Rancheria Gardens, it seems like. I do recommend that council members take a look at that if you haven't had a chance. And it did include some suggestions for questions from the Yan Alley gardeners. But the main request from the gardeners that the gardens remain the same size, not be reduced in size, was not addressed in the survey. And in regards to the survey, it is available to the general public to respond to, as well as the gardeners. A group of us met, the gardeners met last Saturday, and we were wondering if the results from the survey are going to contrast the responses of active gardeners and those on the waiting list with the responses of general community members. We've been concerned that Parks and Recreation Department is not being fully transparent about how the survey will be used and what the specifics are to the proposed plan. Will the results from the survey be available to the public? And will the plans for changing the garden, once the survey's been kind of analyzed, include specifics on measurements of the overall garden size? We've seen a lot of diagrams, but we have requested, exact measurements. And I think that's really important for looking at the future of this. And finally, I still have to wonder why the permitted and proposed plans reduce the size of the whole garden when there's over 25 people on the waiting list trying to get a plot. Parks and Recreation told us they have to move the fence in because of exercise equipment that's already been purchased, and that the permitted design places the equipment right next to where the fence is.
You'll need to wrap up, please.
Yeah, I'm almost done. And it seems to me that this exercise equipment could be placed in a shadier spot elsewhere in the park. This would be an opportunity to preserve the existing space in the garden, particularly the sunny spots. And though the gardeners do not own the garden, we have invested our time, our energy, our money in creating beautiful gardens that enhance the environment in our community.
Okay, thank you
Yan
very much.
Alley and Rancheria Gardens, I've got one sentence left, are not simply open spaces to be dug up and then rebuilt by the city. Please work to save our community gardens.
You got the better
Thank
part
you.
of 4 minutes there, so. All right, very good. Mr. Clerk, are there any further commenters?
No further comments.
Very good. Let's move to the consent calendar. Do you have some items to read?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. Item 3, adoption of ordinance to amend municipal code to allow for electronic bidding and bidder pre-qualification. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by amending sections 4.52.055, 4.52.070, 4.52.160, 4.52.165 relating to bidding, and by adding section 4.52.210 relating to pre-qualification of bidders. Item 4, adoption of ordinance amendments related to review of development projects for pre-existing code violations. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by amending sections 1.25.050, 30.205.050, 30.205.160, and 30.280.030 relating to review of development projects for pre-existing code violations. And item 6, set a date for public hearing regarding renewal of levy for fiscal year 2023 for the Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment District. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara declaring its intention to continue the wildland fire suppression assessment within the foothill and extreme foothill zones, declaring the work to be of more than general or ordinary benefit and describing the district to be assessed to play the costs and expenses thereof, preliminarily approving the updated engineer's report, stating intention to continue assessments for fiscal year 2023, and establishing a time of 2:00 p.m. on Tuesday, June 7th, 2022, in the City Council chambers for a public hearing on the wildland fire suppression assessment.
Thank you. Does anyone need to pull an item off the calendar? Ms. Gutierrez?
I would just like to ask the city administrator if she can give the public a little bit more information on item number 5.
Okay, pulling item 5.
Our Parks and Recreation Department contracts with various people for provision of parks, and this is an agreement with one of those such providers in order to provide a Lego camp, which is generally very well-received by the people, the children who attend it. And as part of that, they generally also agree to provide some level of scholarship to some of the attendees.
Thank you.
Do you need to vote on that separately? Okay, very good. Are there any public speakers for this? Mr. Clerk?
There are no public speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
So move the consent calendar.
Moved by Friedman,
Second.
second by Alejandro Gutierrez. We have a roll call vote, please.
This is a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez to move the consent calendar forward. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Very good, passed unanimously. Okay, we'll go to our next item. We have an item to read, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if you may, can we get a report from the Finance Committee?
Oh, can we get a report from the Finance Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Finance Committee met today, and we went over the general fund fee assessments for increases for next fiscal year. And we heard them, and they will be presented at each department throughout the upcoming budget.
Okey dokey. And speaking of which, what's the item you wanted to read for us, Mr. Clerk?
We have item 7, approval of tax and license administration services agreement.
Very good. Mr. DiMartini.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DiMartini, and I'm the city's finance director. It is my pleasure to present an overview of a proposal to implement a new online payment system for business licenses, utility users tax, and other assessments in the current fiscal year. And along with me is Ms. Brenda Craig, who is a supervisor in the business office in the finance department that is responsible for the staff that manages all of our tax payments and will be responsible for this system. The agenda for today's presentation is to talk about a number of technology improvement initiatives currently underway and planned for in the finance department. We'll talk about the current business license administration program. We'll then talk about the improvements that are envisioned with implementing the Muni Services Agreement for business license administration. We'll then talk about the timeline and the implementation process of this project. We'll present to you a number of budget impacts in regards to implementing this agreement, and then take any questions, have public comment and discussion that you would like to have. So first, we wanted to start off with describing a number of technology initiatives currently underway. In the business licenses program, we're looking at upgrading our technology to be able to provide new software to allow for additional methods of payment by our business community. And also conducting a review of our municipal code for our business license program. We're also in the early stages of reviewing all of our credit card processing. We do have a number of credit card processors that currently take in payments with different types of fees, different types of arrangements. There is just a need for continued credit card processing for various citywide functions, and so we want to be able to do a comprehensive review with that as well. We also look to reducing paper and reduce a number of more manual processes whenever possible, and this particular project is right in line with those initiatives. This slide summarizes some of the challenges that we currently face with our business license tax administration. Our current software is outdated. It does not have any robust functionality that we really need and has very limited reporting capability. Our processes are very manual, and they're very paper-based, and they're ripe for error, and they're just very labor-intensive. We currently do not offer an online customer portal for our business community, and that is something that they have been communicating to us for a number of years, and particularly during COVID, it has become more apparent how much better customer service we could offer if we provide that portal to them. We also have limited payment options. They're able to pay their taxes and their assessments with a check or cash. Some of them pay with an ACH payment, but we currently do not offer credit card payments for those. We'd like to be able to do that. Also, our municipal code is in need of review. It has not been looked at comprehensively in many years. That is a project that we would like to undertake in the upcoming budget year. Also, we have current customer service support downstairs, Monday through Friday, normal business hours. It's been a little bit more limited post sort of opening up from COVID, but there is no online sort of customer service capability. All of these limitations we're hoping to address with moving forward with this project. This slide summarizes the number of transactions that occur downstairs. Over 15,000 business license renewals or new applications, over 3,000 utility user tax remittances, over 3,000 parking business improvement district assessments, and over 1,600 Old Town and Downtown business improvement districts. There are more than 20,000, and I think some of those are quarterly, so it's even more than that, transactions that occur. So it's a very high volume, and so there's just really a need to be able to automate and turn many of those to becoming more electronic whenever possible. So now let's talk about the project that is before you for your consideration with Muni Services. And before I start about what the project entails, I'll say that we currently do have a very successful relationship with Muni Services currently. They assist us with our sales tax, our business license tax, our UT, and a few others with auditing services and compliance services. And so we are expanding our functionality with utilizing their services. This slide summarizes what the tax administration program would look like. It would have a very robust communication plan, which would have a great deal of communication up front to have automated and more manual notification to businesses when necessary. It will prompt them to be able to pay their taxes on time. We'll have a series of forms, so it will look no different to them as far as how they prepare their tax remittances to the city. We will have much more robust back-end reconciliation and reporting capability that we currently do not have with our current systems. And their program has an online portal, so businesses can log on to their account online, submit any documentation that is required, submit their renewal information, and will be able to pay their tax online with a credit card if they choose to do so. It will be a much better, seamless experience for our business license taxpayers. So for this project, we are planning on implementing this tool for business licenses, utility users tax, the Parking Business Improvement District, and also for the Downtown Old Town Business Improvement District assessments. The system it has the functionality to allow for hotel operators to pay their TOT remittances online as well, but we're going to hold on that for the moment and be able to assess that at a later time. We want to make sure that we are implementing this system successfully, so we're going to focus on those high transaction, high volume ones first. The online tool is very interactive. As I said earlier, it'll allow for online account setup for a business. All the online forms will be available in English and in Spanish. It will allow for e-filing, automatic calculation. It'll have interactive data validation, so when they enter in their inputs about gross receipts, for example, it will calculate out what the tax payment should be. It will offer additional payment options through a credit card, as I mentioned earlier. It will have online portal support 24/7. Again, that's an improvement from just our business office downstairs being open up through normal business hours. And you will be able to upload documents. This is a screen that shows what it will look like from the staff's perspective. We will have much better improved real-time reporting capability to be able to monitor payment activity as it's coming in. It will also facilitate a significant reduction of paper and envelope and printing usage, and we will be able to collect payments in a secure fashion. This slide summarizes the timeline for implementation. Hoping we get your approval today, we will move forward as expeditiously as possible with Muni Services to implement, with our phase 1 process projected to be complete in the next few months, in September of 2022. We will then have around a 3-month post-go-live monitoring process, just to make sure that we are providing businesses with an adequate level of support, make sure all the forms are correct, all of the online submissions are working correctly. And then our phase 2 of this project will be to fire up the credit card processing. So let's talk about the budgetary impacts with implementing this project. This slide summarizes what it will cost for us to implement this project by the different types of assessments and taxes that are projected to be remitted through the online portal. In total, the maximum amount will be $272,000 a year. And that is based on our current estimates of the annual transactions that come in for the different taxes and assessments. And there is a fee per remittance. You'll see that it's $15 per business license tax remittance and $4 for all of the other ones. There is a separate credit card processing fee called a convenience fee that is a slide coming up here requesting the council to approve of that fee in the upcoming fiscal year 2023 budget process for the finance department. If we do not apply the convenience fee, then the city will have to pay for the convenience fee if a business is going to pay with a credit card. And we estimate that it will be anywhere between $40,000 to $160,000 a year, depending on the volume of businesses that take advantage and avail themselves of that convenience fee. The convenience fee is 3% of the total amount. It's important to note, though, that if a business chooses to pay their tax through an ACH or an e-check, there is no fee associated with that. We also wanted to highlight a number of expenditure savings or cost offsets that we fully expect that we will achieve through implementing this project. There is currently 1 vacant position in the cashiering unit, and we will continue to hold that position vacant so that we can evaluate the appropriate level of staffing that is required to support this project. There's approximate savings there. We will experience savings from our legacy software application that we will retire once we go live with this project. We will also have a significant amount of savings from just postage and billing, printing tax certificates and paper. A lot of that will become automated. It will become electronic through email communication or through the portal itself. So all of that cost will go away. We also expect that there will be additional revenue that we will recognize in our business license tax program. It's hard to say what that will be, but we know that there will be additional outreach with the business community. We know that that Muni Services has more bandwidth than our current city staff to be able to follow up and go and research and find out if there's business activity where a license is required. And that's fairly typical when a city implements a program like this, that will occur. It's just hard to know at this moment what that will be, but we'll be happy to report back to you at a later time if we do experience an uptick in our tax revenue. I mentioned the convenience fee earlier. We just presented this to the Finance Committee earlier today. We will request that the council approve of the 3% convenience fee for the credit card processing for businesses that choose to pay their tax online with a credit card. And again, if this fee is not approved, then the city would be required to pay for that fee itself. So we're requesting that we pass that along to the businesses because it truly is a convenience. They can pay with a credit card or with a check or pay in cash if they would like to do so. Finally, staff's recommendation to the City Council is to authorize the Finance Director to execute an agreement with Avenue Muni Services LLC for tax and license administration services for 3 years with an option to extend the agreement for 2 one-year periods at an estimated cost of $272,000 per year. That concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Are there questions for staff? Mr. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Mr. DiMartini. So I pay my water bill online forever. It's a different system. I think you can pay police department infractions online. That would probably be a different system. I'm past junior guards by a couple years, but I remember slogging through Parks and Rec's system and yelling at the computer. So why do we not just have a kingdom for online payments that reflects the entire city's operations? Why do we have these little silos of different methods and agreements?
Councilmember Jordan, that's a great question. I'll start, and I might ask Ms. Craig to chime in. I think the best way to answer that question is that for each of the different city departments that have a need for payment processing, many of them are in different places in implementing their services. And so some of them have been able to implement systems over time that have that built-in credit card processing capability with it. And so some of them have been able to implement it sooner than others. This operation that we have downstairs, it's very, very high volume, and we have not had the capability or the system application functionality to be able to do it until now in working with Community Services. So we're ready to go. I recognize, though, that it's not the most efficient way to implement these programs and these projects. I mentioned earlier that one of our initiatives is to take a comprehensive look at all of our credit card processing because we have different fees that we pay for them. They're on different platforms. It would be great if there was sort of a one-stop city portal to be able to transact with the city. Some cities have been able to successfully do that. It is a large undertaking to be able to do that, but I do think that is an opportunity for the future.
Okay. And then on that sheet where you lay out the $272,000, and it's expressed there by transaction, is that truly what the vendor agreement is, that it's X transactions or type of transactions, and that's what we pay, or is there a minimum that you're stuck with, or are you stuck with that $272,000 even if less users than you anticipate subscribe?
Councilmember Jordan, the professional services agreement does stipulate a fee amount per transaction.
Okay.
There is no minimum fee amount that we will be paying them. It truly is a per transaction fee.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have further questions from council? Do we have any public speakers on this?
There are no hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. Ms. Snedden?
Thank
Comments?
you. Just a quick comment. Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I would just say it's about time. I mean, this is customer service, it's modernizing, it's in line with everything else that people expect to be able to pay online. So thank you for taking care of this.
Mr. Jordan?
So I'd echo that too, and I'd echo the bigger picture too. It's annoying to go to one site for one thing, and if I was one of these customers too, have to go to another site for another thing. I don't pay a convenience fee at the water department. I don't understand why, because I do put it on a credit card. But if you're looking for feedback also today on the convenience fee, definitely, I do it everywhere. I do it with the county. I do it other places. I do it at the donut shop. So I agree that we should not see an erosion in, again, or an increase in our expenses as a result of modernizing like this.
All right, further comments from council, or can somebody want to entertain a motion? Mr.
I'll move the
Friedman.
staff recommendation.
Moved? Moved by Friedman, second by Alejandro Gutierrez. May we have roll call vote, please?
This is a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez to move the staff recommendation for item 7 forward. Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Very good. That's you. Thank you. Mr. DiMartini, will you read the next item, please, Mr. Clerk?
Next, we have item 8, adoption of resolution and status report on implementation of the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan and acceptance of grant funds. that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 21-045, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2022 for sea level rise adaptation grants.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm Melissa Hetrick, Acting Energy and Climate Manager with the Sustainability and Resilience Department. And today I'm here to give you an update on the implementation of the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. So in addition to giving you an update on the plan, the purpose of this hearing is for City Council to accept grant funds that the California Coastal Commission just awarded the city for 3 sea level rise adaptation projects, for council to authorize staff to sign a memorandum of understanding with Beacon to undertake one of those projects, and for the council to consider the future of the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan Subcommittee. So as you'll recall, in February 2021, council unanimously approved the city's first Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. And this plan presents a phased approach to planning for sea level rise based on close monitoring of changing shoreline conditions and then taking action when certain triggers or thresholds are reached. The plan presents very specific near-term actions the city should take in the next 10 years to prepare for increased flooding and erosion as a result of sea level rise. And it also presents a structure for decision-making in the mid and long term. This phased approach really relies on development of a shoreline monitoring program. And as you'll hear through this presentation, that is one of the projects that Coastal Commission is funding. So the plan identified over 42 action items that the city should start in the next 5 years to prepare for sea level rise. But council and the Sea Level Rise Subcommittee highlighted 8 highest priority actions that the city should start as soon as possible. And those are shown on your screen now. And you'll see that the majority of these projects address flooding and erosion hazards that the city already faces during major storm events that just will get worse with sea level rise. So in the last year, we've been coordinating implementation of the adaptation plan out of the Sustainability and Resilience Department in collaboration with our Climate Adaptation Interdepartmental Staff Team. And together, we've been further scoping out those highest priority action items and looking at how the action items could be combined and where we might also combine our resiliency efforts with existing capital improvement projects or needs at the city. And we've been pursuing funding opportunities for those projects. In addition, we've been tracking emerging information and legislation on sea level rise. For example, FEMA just reassessed their whole flood insurance program. NOAA just released new sea level rise projections for our area. And USGS just released a model showing impacts to groundwater levels from sea level rise that will be very relevant for our city. We've also been coordinating regionally through Beacon and the Santa Barbara County Climate Collaborative and working with our state and federal agency partners through participating in the California Coastal Commission Sea Level Rise Working Group and our Coastal Cities Group. In addition, we've been presenting at a number of public outreach and community events. So in the last year, there's been a number of emerging funding opportunities for sea level rise and adaptation resilience. In particular, FEMA changed its Hazard Mitigation and Resilient Infrastructure Grant Program to include mitigation of future hazards. And projects within that program now rank higher if they have a climate adaptation component. And so we have been in the process of comprehensively updating our hazard mitigation program to include our sea level rise projects so that we can apply for this funding. In addition, there was a significant budget surplus at the state level this year, and a lot of the money has been designated toward resiliency projects. The Coastal Conservancy has been given $300 million to disperse for resiliency projects along the coast. The Office of Planning and Research and Ocean Protection Council has been given $250 million to disperse for grant projects along the coast as well. And so each of these agencies is currently undergoing a strategic planning process to determine how this money should be spent. And we've been engaging with each of these agencies as they develop their grant parameters and look at the kind of projects that they want to fund. And we anticipate that solicitations for these grant funds will come out toward the end of the year. The California Coastal Commission also received $30 million for their local coastal grant program. And in December, staff applied for 3 different sea level rise projects. In March, the Coastal Commission fully awarded all 3 of those projects for a total of $2.115 million to be spent between 2022 and 2025. And I'll just quickly go through those 3 projects. The first project that was funded is development of a regional coastal adaptation monitoring program. And while the city applied for the grant on this project, it's intended that Beacon will manage this project. The intent of the program is to track parameters such as sea levels, beach widths, bluff position, and groundwater levels to inform when adaptation actions are needed and to evaluate the success of projects regionally. Beacon intends on developing the program through their Science Advisory Committee and with a team of consultants, as well as an agency stakeholder team that the city will be a part of. After the monitoring parameters are developed, there'll be 2 years of pilot monitoring and then a reassessment period. And really, the goal of this program is not to create a whole lot of new monitoring data, but rather to take data that's already out there, produced by NOAA and USGS and others, and put it into a format that makes it easier to make decisions on adaptation. The second project that was funded is actually a series of projects. It's a suite of projects that are our highest priority projects located in the waterfront area. And this includes a wastewater and water systems adaptation options report. This will look at options for moving our sewer trunk mains and other co-located infrastructure that is located under the beach south of Cabrillo Boulevard. This study will also look at mid and long-term options for our wastewater and water systems. The second study that's part of this plan is a feasibility study of options to raise or modify the harbor breakwater, rock grind, sand spit, and walkways. And this project is key not only to protecting the harbor, but also protecting the lower West Beach neighborhood. So both of these technical studies will get folded into a 30-year waterfront adaptation plan. And essentially what this is a shoreline management plan for the waterfront area for the 30-year period. And that it will take a look at changing our sediment management activities, looking at beach berm construction and perhaps dune creation along our waterfront. It will assess how we should be designing and flood-proofing any new structures along the waterfront. And then it will look at means to flood-proof portions of the harbor commercial area and other structures along the waterfront that will be subject to flooding more frequently in the future. So this 30-year time frame was chosen in part because in the 30-year time frame, it's anticipated that around 1.5 to 2 feet of sea level rise will occur. And this map shows the flood hazards associated with 2.5 feet of sea level rise. And you'll notice that the hazards at 2.5 feet of sea level rise really still remain south of Cabrillo Boulevard. And it's not until larger amounts of sea level rise, seen closer to 2100 or 2150, where we start seeing storm flooding and tidal inundation significantly north of Cabrillo Boulevard. So the 30-year time period in this management plan is the time in which we are going to need to prepare the waterfront for increased flooding, but before the time we might need to employ or decide upon employing large-scale flood protection measures such as levees or raising the height of Cabrillo Boulevard, which would really change the character of the existing waterfront. And then the third project that's been funded by the Coastal Commission is an airport and Goleta Slough adaptation plan. This will be led by the airport department and builds upon the 2015 multi-jurisdictional Goleta Slough area sea level rise and management plan. This will take a close look at adaptation options for the airport infrastructure and will be in the same format as our citywide adaptation plan. This grant also includes money for completing a comprehensive update to the airport and Goleta Slough local coastal program that's been underway for a few years. So in addition to the projects funded by Coastal Commission, staff is targeting 3 other projects for funding in the next few years. The first is actually a suite of projects we're calling the coastal flooding and drainage projects. And this would essentially be a master drainage study of the lower portion of the city that would factor in increased rainfall from climate change and sea level rise. It would assess potential impacts to the stormwater system and adaptation options for the stormwater system. We would take a look at changes to floodplain regulations south of Highway 101 and also reevaluate the adequacy of our existing creek development setbacks. The other 2 projects that we're looking to fund are redesign of the Laguna Tide Gate system and channel, and then various flood mitigation and restoration projects along Sycamore Creek. And as I mentioned earlier, there is quite a bit of money coming down the pike from state agencies that we could apply for. Right now, our biggest constraint, to be honest, is having staff time to manage all these projects, which would be occurring at the same time because the grant programs are all at the same time. And so we're making sure as we're applying for grant funds for all these projects that we are asking to fully fund staff time and consultant time for all the projects. So moving forward and implementing the adaptation plan, we'll continue to centrally coordinate that program out of the Sustainability and Resilience Department. In addition, we'll continue the climate adaptation interdepartmental staff team. And when we started development of the adaptation plan in 2018, Council did create a sea level rise adaptation plan subcommittee that consisted of members of Council and the Harbor Planning, Water, and Parks and Recreation Commissions. And that subcommittee was very successful. It was key to creating the phased approach that's in our plan now and for creating a policy framework that we're using now to prioritize projects. And I just want to take a moment to thank that subcommittee for all their hard work. But now that the plan is completed, staff is recommending that Council disband the Sea Level Rise Subcommittee with the intent that the Sustainability Council Committee advise on adaptation projects and priorities moving forward. And this really stems out of a desire citywide to try to reduce the number of committees that we have, and in particular, single issue committees. And staff thinks that the Sustainability Council Committee both have the time right now and the expertise to take on adaptation projects. But that said, staff will continue to update our other commissions as specific adaptation studies and projects move forward in their areas of expertise. So in summary, staff recommends that Council accept the California Coastal Commission grant funds, that Council adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 22 budget and increase revenue and expenditure appropriations for the 3 sea level rise grant funded projects. The Council authorized the Sustainability and Resilience Director to sign a memorandum of understanding with Beacon for the shoreline monitoring program, and that Council disband the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan Subcommittee with the intention that the Sustainability Council Committee will advise on climate adaptation. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions. In addition, Eulalia Parenteau, Sustainability and Resilience Director, and Mike Wiltshire, Waterfront Director, are also here for questions.
Thank you. You want to wait for comments? Do you have questions for staff?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question going back to those flood maps. So how is that different from the flooding that already exists today?
Okay, I got one question.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, that's a really good question. So these maps, they only show flooding and other hazards that would be exacerbated by sea level rise. There are separate maps that show flooding from rainfall or river events, which would actually be a bigger area than shown on this map. So for instance, on this map, the area north of Highway 101 at 6.6 feet of sea level rise, that area is already, that blue area is already in the 100-year floodplain. And it's anticipated that flooding associated with sea level rise during storm events would be at similar depths to that flooding that we already see now, but it would just be a lot more frequent because not only would it be happening during high rainfall events, but also during high coastal storm events or high wave events, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was just kind of made aware that that area is already prone to be flooded during rainfall, so it just made me wonder how much worse it would get, but that does look pretty bad. Just out of curiosity, where does the proposed new police station fall in that map?
Councilmember Gutierrez, the proposed police station is outside of this area, and in fact, the police station's outside of the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain. It's right outside of it.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question. You mentioned monitoring bluff positions, bluff retreat. And so which agency will be will there be a determinate bluff line? I bring this up because we had a bit of a controversy a couple of years back due to a property development. And it just seemed like it was a kind of a squishy determination where the bluff line was. So will there be definitive bluff lines that we can count on as being established as we go forward in this study?
Mayor Rouse, part of the process will be convening this team of experts and agencies to determine what parameters should be used for bluff line. I would say, though, as far as the bluff determining jurisdictional boundaries, we will likely rely on Coastal Commission approved maps for that and data associated with that. This monitoring program will more be to inform how the bluff is moving or how much it's eroding. But that is a very good question, and that is one of the topics that will be of conversation to this Science Advisory Committee and agency.
Yeah, it'd be
group.
great to get as much firm guidance as we can get as we go forward on these questions that come forward. So, further questions? Is there a public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Okay, we'll go to comments. Ms. Sneddon?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I just have to say it's very gratifying to see that implementation is already happening. I think when we first started this with the Sea Level Rise Committee, it was sort of impossible to see how any of this important work would be funded. So I think it's to already be getting back plans on how we're going to move forward is gratifying. I have to say a lot of the public still is not aware of the extremities of these maps. And to your credit, and on the website, the two presentations, one in English and one in Spanish, are really, really excellent resources. And I use them in my classes every year. And over 200 students since we first implemented this, and not one of them was aware of it previously. And then after engaging with the interactive maps, with the adaptation plan, and seeing the impacts locally and exactly where, I think it really has done a lot to inform the public, and thank you for that. I want to thank the Coastal Commission and Commissioner, Councilmember Harmon, for supporting this important work. I think the really important long-range planning done early on to assess the vulnerabilities and to actually make that detailed plan has set us up so well to be able to aggressively go after grants and put us in the position to have that plan. I really also with you want to thank the Sea Level Rise Committee for that important work that informed that adaptation plan and really detailed into that list of priorities and the trigger points and that long-ranging look at when to implement certain parts of the plan. And so these recommendations are right in line with that. The Sea Level Rise Committee had identified the waterfront as a high priority, so that funding is going to be well spent. Airport and Goleta Slough, again, that was a hard place to think about where the funding for those issues, coastal flooding. We know what's coming from this important work, and even if the public isn't all the way on board yet with seeing what those implications are, I think it's so forward-thinking and progressive to be making these plans and implementing this work now. I do think that because of that very detailed and important work with the Sea Level Rise Committee, that we're now in a good position to carry on the work and implement the plan without the additional input, unless it was needed at a later time with all of those individual boards and commissions weighing in also. But I just want to make the public statement that their input is always welcome at all times. They're very invested in this plan and seeing it forward. So I'm happy to move forward all of the staff recommendations, and then also with the encouragement for anyone in the public to please visit this website and watch those very informative videos and look at the maps and a lot of detailed information that's there.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo my colleague, Councilman Sneddon's comments. And this is many years in the making of getting to this point, and there was a lot with the Sea Level Rise Subcommittee, so I also want to thank the entire committee and all the staff that participated in that. And it has paid dividends, because we've seen without it, we wouldn't be in the position to get these grants that we just have, and it'll lead into our next item with Beacon. And I'm excited about the opportunity that the regional partnership with Beacon on the monitoring presents, because as we deal with sea level rise, we really need to look beyond borders of individual jurisdictions to really look at comprehensively how we're addressing it, because ultimately the sand that starts in Goleta becomes the beaches of Ventura and Oxnard and so forth. So we're all part of the littoral cell here, and so this will definitely help us in the planning process going forward. And again, I do appreciate that we are making progress on the planning for the waterfront, because that was a high priority that came out of the Sea Level Rise Subcommittee. And now that we're in this phase, folding it into the Sustainability Committee I think is a good move in terms of just planning and then getting feedback and also continuing to have the public participation. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will just echo the comments of both my colleagues, and I said this at the Sustainability Committee meeting, so I apologize, I'm repeating myself, but I think it certainly bears repeating, and I want to make sure that our whole community has a chance to hear what I heard when these grants came to the Coastal Commission to be voted on. I guess it was back in March. I have to tell you, it was, I already knew this, but it was so incredible to hear Coastal Commission staff talk about what a professional, amazing group of folks we have working on this in the city of Santa Barbara. And I think I probably don't have to tell staff members that it's rare to get that kind of compliment from Coastal Commission staff. They really spoke about how your work is second to none in the state of California. So not just regionally, but across the state. The way that you and our stakeholders on the committee have really engaged, as our colleagues said, seeing what's to come and being really visionary in figuring out how are we going to adapt so that our city can be resilient and survive what we know is going to come. To be representing the city and hear Coastal Commission staff acknowledge all of your work and hold it up as a model, and then say not only is it a model, but we're going to fund it, was really a wonderful experience for me, something that I am deeply proud of, to be learning from all of you and to be working with you on it. And it's something that I think our whole city really should celebrate. So credit goes to all of you involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have a few more questions that just hit me. So according to this map, just to get your general opinion, do you think we should take a moment to take into consideration whether we should encourage denser housing in this area now to avoid potential disaster in the future?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, that's a good question. It's worth taking a look. The map before it, you'll see there's a big change at around 4 or 5 feet of sea level rise. And if you look at, sorry to switch around so much, the sea level rise projections, the adaptation plan took a look at the middle line, which is, has a 1 in 200 chance of being met or exceeded, which is a fairly conservative projection. The more likely projection that has more like a 20% chance of being met or exceeded is the lower orange line. And so under that line, you're really looking at something like 3 feet of sea level rise by 2100. So we could have a fair amount of time where we aren't seeing increased flooding north of Cabrillo Boulevard. And this really is going to be a phased approach, which is why we are have established this phased system and decision-making based on thresholds. And, but, you know, eventually that could be a discussion item at a certain threshold. But for now, the phase we're in now is really just tracking sea level rise, looking at potentially changing the floodplain regulations south of Highway 101 so that people flood-proof their buildings to a higher base flood elevation. So if there is storm flooding that comes through, which will be the first thing to affect that area, that they're ready for that. And then we'll be tracking progress from that point forward.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for everything you do.
All right, very good. If there are no further comments, I would entertain a motion.
There was a motion for the staff recommendation.
And I seconded it.
Okay, so is that A through F? Yes. The whole banana? Very good. Mr. Clark?
Sorry, so who was the motion?
Sneddon and Friedman.
Got it.
These guys.
So this is a motion by Councilmember Sneddon, seconded by Councilmember Friedman to move forward with the staff recommendation for item 8. Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff. We have the next item, please, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is item 9, update on recent activities and accomplishments of the Beach Erosion Authority for Clean Oceans and Nourishment.
Hello.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city staff. My name is Mark Baylor, and I'm the executive director of Beacon. And I'm actually here today representing the chair of the Beacon Board of Directors, Greg Hart, who's Santa Barbara County Supervisor, and the membership of Beacon, which is derived from 8 local jurisdictions that we'll talk about today. Beacon has not been before the city council in some time, so I welcome the opportunity to update you with our activities and our accomplishments. And I think it's fitting that today you're hearing a joint grant proposal from the city staff and from Beacon. Beacon's been working with your staff for more than a year now as part of the Sea Level Rise Subcommittee of the Santa Barbara Resilience, Collaborative, and been working with the harbor as part of our long-term studies of regional sediment management. And much like the city pivoted in 2018 to sea level rise adaptation as a major goal, Beacon has pivoted from a focus on regional sediment management to an alignment of regional sediment management and sea level rise adaptation. And you all know why. Because if our policy is to make resilient shoreline, make our shoreline more resilient, and we want to use nature-based solutions, we need sediment and sand. And as the council member correctly observed, your sand comes from a different place within the larger littoral cell and goes to a different place in the eastern part of the littoral cell. So the regional perspective is an important one. So we have prepared a short PowerPoint that goes through kind of some of the more important overview topics of Beacon. Is it possible to do it here, or you have to advance it? Okay, go ahead. Thanks, Melissa. So why Beacon? Why today? Who cares? The scientists have told us that in the absence of accelerated management actions, this region is going to lose 1/3 to 2/3 of its beaches. That's true for the entire Southern California bight. One thing that Beacon has done throughout its history is relied on the best available science. But in the last couple of years, as these threats and as the uncertainty of the science has emerged as a topic, Beacon actually has impaneled a science advisory committee, including scientists from our own region. But we have 12 very distinguished scientists, and they are impaneled in order to address the questions that the mayor raised earlier with regard to what's the level of uncertainty, what's the path we're going forward, what's the rate at which these things will occur. And there's a great deal of uncertainty, which is why we impanel a multidisciplinary panel of scientists to have a better approach than maybe a single discipline would produce for us. So it's important that Beacon is available as a regional partner to actually address these issues because they are bigger than any jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So I want to cover just 4 quick topics, and I won't take too much of your time today, but we have some information that we'd like to present to you. It's who is Beacon? We are Beacon. What do we do? How do we perform our activities? We're a non-regulatory, voluntaristic joint powers authority of 8 local governments. And why does it matter? I've started to brief you on why it matters, and you know this better than I. With TOT and tourism as a major anchor of Santa Barbara, in the state of California, tourism is coastal tourism is a $20 billion industry, probably more now, that's an outdated figure. And you should know that more people visit the beach in California annually than visit all the attractions, private commercial attractions, entertainment attractions in the entire state. It's a very important economic anchor, but in Santa Barbara and Ventura, it's a cultural anchor. It's the heart of the community. And when we go and work with our partners like the city of Santa Barbara, we do understand the not one size fits all, and that these programs and policies have to be adapted to jurisdictions. So let me just explain that a joint powers agreement is allowed by state law. You have many of them, you're parts of many of them. This authority was created in 1986. Seems like a long time ago to get on the erosion regional planning bandwagon. But in the history of Santa Barbara Ventura, we had 2 very visionary politicians. We had Naomi Schwartz in your county, and we had John Flynn in Ventura County. And they came together to realize how important it was to work regionally. As I said, we're a non-regulatory voluntaristic organization supported by your dues and the dues of the other members, and then we leverage funds as you saw today. We're trying to get aligned so that we can support the coastal restoration goals of the community, natural resource protection, as well as prepare for resilient and sustainable shorelines for all public and private development. As I mentioned, we actually now have impaneled a series of scientists, but we've always relied on good science, and it's a foundation of the work we do. And working with your staff and others in the region, I think we've advanced some of that science through the use of these technical expertise. Next slide, please. So I want to remind you that you're joined by your 5 other coastal cities and your 2 county governments. And there's actually 8 members, but there's 10 votes on Beacon. That's 2 for each county and 1 for each jurisdiction. And you can see by the graphic that we produced why Beacon would be an important component of your governance of your coastal resources. Look at the size of the 6 coastal cities. As we already emphasized, the littoral cell extends through all of Santa Barbara County and about 90% of Ventura County. The corporate jurisdiction that you individually have as a landscape, it's just not big enough to deal with these problems because the sand comes from the Santa Maria River around Point Conception, from the other rivers, and then sits in the littoral cell for a very long period of time is distributed to our sandy beaches. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we've already have this governance board from the representatives, but we've adopted and we've tried to elaborate on some of the governance activities we can do so we actually accelerate our progress. We have an executive committee now, which is 5 of the 10 members. They meet in addition to the regular bi-monthly meetings. And as I said, we mentioned now we've established a science advisory committee that has already resulted in product. So for example, we established a research agenda which identified regional monitoring shortfalls. Then we worked with your staff and others in the county to identify, can we have a pilot project around regional monitoring that can address these questions of triggers, thresholds, and then policy changes that result. Next slide, please. So I want to emphasize what we do. We partner. We are you, as it turns out, but we partner with you. And we spend a lot of time. We have our program manager, Gerald Kamadi, who's a resident of Santa Barbara and a long-term practicing professional with Beacon. And we try to, in our practice, really come to a point where we have agreement. It's interesting in Santa Barbara and Ventura County that your city's very far ahead on certain issues with regard to sea level rise adaptation. We've partnered with your staff to identify some of the next step actions that Beacon could partner with the city on. We have experience in doing living shorelines. We have experience in doing managed retreat projects on public property. And so we want to take that experience and share it around with others. But we really try to create models that others use. So I'll emphasize a couple of projects. You see a picture of Surfers Point in Ventura at the river mouth. This is a national, regional, and statewide model of living shoreline development that even though it's been very successful by our monitoring protocols, is only half completed after 30 years. The money that's on the table now for coastal resilience is a one-time, generational opportunity to make implementation progress. I truly believe that. In fact, it's $350 million to the Conservancy in the first year, and potentially $150 million after that, for a total of $500 million to the one agency that you're very familiar with. But other agencies are getting other kinds of resilient money, including the infrastructure funds. So we're on a kind of a warpath telling everybody this is the time to really organize your efforts. Investing in all this work 2018 through now has given you a platform to really do innovative implementation pilot projects. So we're very excited to partner with you. Next slide, please. So where are we working? We're working all across the region. We've spent a lot of time in Goleta at Goleta Beach. We've spent a lot of time at different times with your staff around what is the preparedness for the harbor and for the shoreline. We did actually discuss with the city a living shoreline project here in the city, and that's not ripe yet. But you saw that the staff mentioned potential dune restoration as part of your next tech activities. We're interested to see if that could feasibly be analyzed. We're active at Carpinteria, Ventura, Ventura Access, and then South County in Ventura, Wainimi Beach, which in the absence of continued federal dredging and then disposal of sand on the beach, that beach will disappear. That's scientifically determined already. That's why the obligation is 2 million cubic feet every other year from the federal government to pay for all of it because they had that obligation when they started the harbor. And the harbor has a very negative impact on sand transport. Next slide, please. I think I've covered this to give you a flavor that we are a partnership organization, we're collaborative, we're non-regulatory, and we do rely on leveraging state and federal funds to accomplish the work on your behalf and on the behalf of other members. Next slide, please. So this is a statement that I've made already, but I want to emphasize. Beacon matters. We haven't been before you to tell you of our activities, to tell you about how we spend your dues, to let you know that we have actually advanced the ball. So today you see one of the products of that. We will, using our scientists and technical resources, deliver in this project the best available science to minimize the level of uncertainty and to maximize the clarity around thresholds and triggers. So we can talk about things like bluff retreat or beach width or the condition of the beaches with regard to resilient characteristics. That's a pretty big promise. I don't want to overpromise what we'll get as results because the world that we live in, conservation, is a very uncertain place as to how quickly these changes will occur. But our ambition and our vision, which is now included in our first strategic plan, which the board adopted last year, has all the complementary goals that you discussed today in a regional context. Next slide, please. We can go to the next slide. I don't want to take too much of your time. I've really covered this. It's important that you know that there are barriers and constraints to naturally functioning systems. Not only do we really have to reestablish the coastal ecosystem, we have to establish the watershed ecosystems. And we have roads, railroads, storm drains, we have debris basins, we have houses, we have commercial impressions, then we have essential public facilities, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants, that all have to be analyzed for their risk assessment, and as information develops, the risk probability may change. You need to know that your larger community supports the activities that you're undertaking at your municipal level, but the same is true of the Beacon level. We've done a couple minimal surveys to talk to managers and to representatives to get a sense for, does Beacon have resonance in terms of being part of the solution? And I believe we're getting that feedback back, and I think we're delivering product. And we're very excited to go forward and elaborate on what Beacon's opportunities are. We've been participating as we can in the Coastal Commission Local Government Working Group. We've made presentations to the group. We've provided a lot of information for models of regional cooperation that we think actually Beacon is a good example of. Next slide, please. There's a couple of projects I wanted to go through if we have the time. So I wanted to do a time check. Is it okay that we go through these? Okay. Because I think they're important. This is the project that we're partnering with your city on. There's actually a really long tradition of citizen science in Santa Barbara. These are graduate students who actually conduct shoreline profiling to augment the shoreline profiling done by the United States Geologic Survey. And we're training the next generation of coastal scientists as we collect our information, not just relying on already established professionals to do this work. And we're changing the protocols under which we do this work to make it cost-effective, replicable, and actually transferable to other jurisdictions. This is a very important project for Beacon. I think it's an important project for the region because not only are you going to design your own regional monitoring protocols, we're going to share it with the other jurisdictions. And so hopefully we won't have to reinvent this wheel. If we get a good set of metrics with regard to these topics, we should be able to use them in various locations. And we think that's potentially a cost and staff saving. And then we'll concentrate that information in a place where people can have access to it. We have a notion of an information station or a data depot or whatever you might call it in order to make it transparent. I've been very impressed with the city's web presence with regard to this information. It's a very easy to use website. You really get what you need. And we're trying to mimic that in our own efforts at Beacon. Next slide, please. So we do large-scale regional sediment management, which means we have a plan. We always update our plans. We're in a place right now where we're updating our sediment management information so that we know exactly what these volumes are, what the need are, what the finances is, what the governance requirements are, because it is a complicated landscape, to be sure. Next slide, please. So it's important for you to know that we live on your dues. We live on the dues of all our members. But we don't only rely on the dues. We have successfully leveraged our budget, which is about $300,000 annually now. This slide is actually outdated. We've raised about $1.4 million in the last 4 years. We are on the move to leverage our funds and to provide for the full staff cost and full technical service that's needed to actually implement these projects. Next slide, please. So I love the opportunity to come and talk to you in the Santa Barbara City Council chambers. This little personal note, as a former member of the Airport Commission, City Airport Commission, former member of the Santa Barbara Planning Commission, member of the Environmental Hearing Board, this used to be my home for many of my working days when I was a graduate student at UCSB and then a resident of the city of Santa Barbara. And it's very wonderful to be back and hear all the progress you've made in my old hometown, as it were. So thanks very much. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baylor. Very good. Questions from council, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Baylor, and I see Mr. Kamadi out there as well. Thank you both, our excellent Beacon staff. Just have questions now. I'll make comments after the questions. Just a couple quick ones. So on the big project right now that we're moving forward is the regional monitoring. Can you just speak a little bit more to, one, the scope of it? What's what areas are you implementing the program? Is it just City of Santa Barbara, or is it throughout the Beacon jurisdiction? And then the advantages to having a regional system rather than each of us doing our own. And then the other question is, in addition to the science, what are some of the other values that we as the City of Santa Barbara are getting from being a member of Beacon, in addition to the science and the planning that we're getting? So those are the two questions. Thank
So
you.
now I have to remember 3 questions in a row. Let's go back to the first question. So
The
I
first
catch
one was
correct.
the regional monitoring, just the.
Okay,
What's the.
thank you.
The area of it, and then the advantages of doing that type of.
So, it's focused on the city of Santa Barbara as a pilot project. It's focused on the metrics around sea level rise monitoring. So it's not all monitoring of water quality and all these other things. It's really focused on your sea level rise metrics. We're focused on the topics that actually Melissa mentioned earlier, which is beach width, bluff retreat, all the physical conditions that would affect the landscape. So we don't know what all those metrics are yet because we haven't done the pilot project, and that's what we're going to do with our Science Advisory Committee and our technical advisors. But the logic was, we start in Santa Barbara, and we see on a pilot project basis, what does the measurement tell us? What is the monitoring result? Does it have a decision support connection to it? So we're focused on this part of the region. We're focused just on the sea level rise component of monitoring, and then we hope to do a pilot project in the city to show does this monitoring protocol that we've all said is essential actually realize usable results. And then and only then would we scale it up, adapt it, change it, improve it, so that it can be applicable to all the jurisdictions here in the county. You ask about value added beyond just the science for Beacon. You know, this is a really interesting question. I didn't know this when I actually, even though I've been watching Beacon for a very long time. Some of the contractors to Beacon have been some of the most impressive professional coastal planners and scientists together. Beacon has brought some of the most current user data to all the communities. We're right now doing an evaluation of cell phone data, so it's kind of big data. It's atomized and it's completely confidential. But we're trying to figure out who comes to the beach, where do they come from? And we're going to turn that information back to all the jurisdictions, including the city of Santa Barbara. And we're pioneering some of this. This is literally millions of data points to figure out how do people, where do they go to the beach? How do they use it? How long do they use it? Where do they come from? And what we found already with some initial just probing of the data is that the beach attracts people from throughout the region, without regard to economic status or location, in spite of the barriers and the constraints that many people in our community have to get to the beach. So we're actually going to provide some economic information and some data back to the groups. And then one of the important Beacon contributions, and I think you know this better than I do, is you talk to your colleagues. You exchange information. So the city of Goleta, and this is something I should have mentioned, and I'm sorry. City of Santa Barbara was the first presentation Beacon had on sea level rise, vulnerability, and adaptation almost 2 years ago. We've now worked through all the jurisdictions that have an adaptation plan, and now we're working through the partners, state parks, Caltrans. We're trying to get a sense of what are the regional needs that the jurisdictions can't take on that Beacon potentially could take on. So it's an incredible sounding board, but it's also a mechanism of communication that allows you to more efficiently talk and plan with your colleagues. That's I think, Beacon's value added, very importantly going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Baylor. I think it's just great to see what Beacon's able to do, and the relationship building with individuals and agencies is key because we're going to have a lot of cross-jurisdictional decisions that'll need to be made going forward with sea level rise planning and adaptation. So appreciate your comments, and I'll make some comments later.
Thank you.
Ms. Nedden?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of, I think, sort of maybe basic questions, but that I'm not sure how they're handled with Beacon. So the first one is, how are the priorities set in terms of beach nourishment? I mean, I know without our sort of constructed geometry of our harbor, we wouldn't have the sand capture that we have, but other beaches need to be, you know, sand physically brought in and nourished. So how do you set the priorities? Is it the beaches that are fastest eroding or those that are most vulnerable, or how do you set that regionally?
Actually, that's an in-process question, and some of it results from what we talked about today. In fact, we are building a process, an evaluation process for threats to our regional beaches. Now, vulnerability analysis has already been done by both counties and 5 of the 6 coastal cities, so some of the information's been on the table. But in addition to that, we're doing additional work on a regional level, and the way we'll prioritize is criteria-based. So threat, ability to actually keep that resource in place. We might lose beaches that historically have attracted visitors We might have to figure out a way to provide them with beach resources. And I don't have to tell you what you already know at Goleta Beach. I mean, there's active talk of just what is the speed at which we would be relocation of utilities? How long can we keep the beach? We'd like to keep the beach in place in a sustainable manner. And we actually have two projects in Goleta. One, the beach itself, and then Goleta Bay. We have a kelp project in Goleta Bay that we think has derivative ecosystem kind of benefits, as it were. So that's a general answer. Specifically, my board went through a year-long strategic planning process. Staff provided a series of priority activities. So we have a series of complementary 6, 7 goals. We have an implementation strategy for the next 2 years to examine what these criteria will be to actually get to our priority through the science. And actually, I mentioned the scientist who actually developed this analysis of beach loss. He's on our science advisory committee, Sean Vasutek. He works at USGS. So we've asked him this criteria question, and this is an active development. I think this will come out of this pilot study that we're going to do. We have prioritized our beaches. Make no mistake about it. We've been working on this for 30 years. East Beach, Goleta Beach, Carp City, State Beach, Summer, and we have these resources, and I think they're almost all valuable priorities. And the way that we do it is not an order, 1 through 10. It's what priorities are in the circle. And then opportunity dictates, is that one going to be funded because that funding source is available to do that? Or is that one going to be funded because it's ready? So there's all those criteria for readiness. That's, in terms of our implementation world, is a really important topic. So we'll put all the priority projects in a circle, and then we'll draw the ones to implement as they can be implemented, which we've done very successfully at Beacon, actually. So we don't do so much, first priority through 30th. We say, what are the priority projects? Priority A, for example, versus B, and we'll have a bundle of those. And you saw them on the slide. Those are the priorities in our region. And I presume once we do this analysis of sea level rise vulnerability in the regional level, we'll probably confirm the same places. But the criteria are, and you know this, and I want to be clear. Beaches that have bluffs in the back that are narrow are most vulnerable. There's no way to move. Beaches that are sandy or spits, like with wetlands, like Goleta Beach, have a much better opportunity to be preserved over time as we relocate some of the land uses. But your question is the question that's a $64,000 question, and if you had an answer, then you'd be the winner of that contest, because that's a really important conversation, and we have yet to do that. We have yet to finish that conversation.
Well, that's why I ask on a regional level, and we have the city perspective, and which, is it conceivable that a beach that can't be saved would drop off the priority list to be able to nourish or restore another beach?
I don't want to invoke a triage strategy yet, because your staff already told you. It's all about triggers and time frame and thresholds. We're not going to give up any landscape.
Okay.
And we're going to plan for all the landscapes until such time as we really find ourselves, it's a choice between A and B. I feel like, this is my personal opinion, I don't want to speak too closely on Beacon because I haven't discussed this all with the board yet, but with losing 90% of our coastal wetlands, 90% of our rocky intertidal, probably a very high percentage of our previous sandy beach resources, my feeling at Beacon is we should save what we have, not prioritize down and then drop things off. And that should only be really a last resort. You have every opportunity, your staff has indicated, you have the time, because you took the foresight to start, to actually plan this out. So you have minimal loss and maximum resilience. I think that's our approach at Beacon.
I appreciate that, thank you. And then you mentioned dredging and redistribution, and I know we have federal funds to do that in Santa Barbara. Are there other regional communities that have dredging as part of their sand plan?
Yeah, and your harbor staff could speak more directly to this. Every harbor is different. So correct me if I get this wrong. Santa Barbara Harbor is dredged twice annually. Ventura Harbor is dredged once annually. Channel Islands Harbor is dredged once every 2 years. So and they're all federally funded. These are all federal projects for the federal part. Like you have a little non-federal part and Ventura does too, but for the federal part, all federally funded, all under a different order of appropriation and authorization, and all in a very complex approval process that requires federal, congressional involvement, lobbying, your staff on top of everything. It's a very complex setting, actually. And something I learned, I didn't realize this. within the littoral cell, we have some of the highest volumes of sand movement on the coast. Even though other parts of Orange and Southern California and San Diego have real demands, we're doing 2 million cubic yards a year about. I think it's 400 and 500 and then 2.4. So it's a lot of sand movement. It's a lot of lobbying with federal legislative representatives to keep the money every year. And the contest between money and sand is we get money. What we need is sand. And in an inflationary period of high cost supply, the money doesn't cover the amount of sand that we need. And that's the equation of all the staff and the lobbying and the things. And that's why we have a regional organization, so we can actually lobby effectively in that context.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. And then just one more question about some of our adaptation strategies talk about beach nourishment and dune restoration. And then I know it's not very favorably looked upon, but is there any chance that groins or other offshore sand capture measures might be able to be employed at any point?
So sand retention structures are a very interesting topic. Scientists will tell you that in the absence of sand retention structures, beach nourishment is a bit of a fool's errand because any particular storm will wash all that sand away, and it's very expensive to put in place. Having said that, sand retention structures are very controversial for the potential for negative environmental impacts of the ecology. So how do we figure this out? This is where Beacon really has a sweet spot. We're not advocating for a groin input location. We're advocating for the analysis of green groins as pilots to see what we can do to minimize environmental impact and maximize sediment benefit. And we feel the same way with reefs. You've seen it in the paper here in Carpinteria, reefs versus groins, groins versus reefs. They're really not one or the other. But Beacon can't say, let's do groins until we really see, can we have groins that are environmentally sound? So in Carpinteria, for example, the proposal there is a steel, sheet pile steel groin that gets pulled out if it doesn't perform as expected. We can't be pulling things in and out all the time, but we can demonstrate. And there are some scientific suggestions for different kinds of rock groins or different kinds of alignment that may have a different impact than traditional groins have had. And we'd like to look at that. Beacon would like to look at that. Like, we'd like to look at reefs too. We have 2 reef proposals in our region that we haven't moved on yet. So the potential is to look at them. I'm not going to say we can or can't because that's what the scientists and the engineers will tell us. But Beacon can do this work, and I think that's important because then we can lift it off this debate of either or and say, well, no, we're studying that. So let's see what the study says.
I really appreciate your answers. Thank you.
I had a question for you. I was a member of the Friends of Goleta Beach from the inception of that organization and sat through many of the hearings with Naomi Schwartz as the chair and whatnot. There was a lot of politics being batted back and forth that kind of got in the way of some of the science. But one thing I didn't quite understand is when we would talk about different kinds of revetment, permeable piers, all these other structural things, and then, you know, many of us that had done littoral studies years ago in school were thinking about what about artificial reefs and what about replenishing the kelp that was lost at Goleta Beach. And now I finally see the kelp reforestation plan it's still under the demonstration kelp anchoring.
It is.
And I'm really having a hard time finding why that would be so controversial. The kelp has established itself on those outflow lines going way past the pier, but it's going the wrong direction. Something built perpendicular to that would diffuse, I would think, a lot of the wave action. So it just seems like such an intuitive thing to do. They do it all over the world, and yet it's taken us to this point to have a demonstration project. How does Beacon come down on something like kelp reforestation or holdfast?
In the absence of Beacon, there wouldn't be a kelp forestation project because there isn't an institutional partner responsible for that necessarily. There's a lot of gaps in governance. And Goleta is a great example. You got the city airport in the middle of Goleta. You got the county beach owned by the county, not connected to the city of Goleta. You've got 2 special districts, sewer district and a water district. You've got a state highway. You got a university. I mean, there's just a lot of clutter and noise in how we've structured our own governance. And then you get to a place like Goleta Bay, like who's responsible? Well, no one's responsible in that sense. And so an agency like Beacon can step in and say, yes, let's try a demonstration. I can't speak to the and I hear in your voice the frustration of the time it takes to do things. I can't speak to the timeliness of how much time it takes to do things, except to say, maybe restoration projects that have a restoration focus and a goal don't need to have the same scrutiny that development projects have, because the theory is they're intended to be restorative. Now, you can argue the components of these restoration projects. A lot of them have parking lots and access trail. They have development to them. But we might look at, and I only say this because there is a green tape movement in Sacramento and along the coast, and even at the Coastal Commission, to be more responsive. And one thing I'll say about Beacon, I don't want to take too much time today, that one thing we're actually trying to figure out is, if everybody has to monitor their individual projects, but only their project site, how does all this information get stitched together to make sense of the ecology or the other aspects? And the only way it does is be brought up to some other level so we can see it across all of them across. And we're working on this, but we're not even close to what we think could be a solution to it. We're just in dialogue with you all about stitching it. We have a partnership with the city now on one aspect of our regional monitoring. It's crazy. And not only did we adopt a strategic plan, we adopted a research agenda that the scientists wanted us to, and it's ambitious, and it addresses exactly these topics. And so it's going to take time. And I don't mean to argue that this is a career, not a job, because it's a job, but things take time.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head from my perspective anyway. I sat there for a lot of years, and exactly right. It was a real stew of governmental jurisdictions, one of those. So I think you're right. Do we have further questions? Do we have comment? Mr. Jordan and then Mr. Friedman.
I'll jump in. I just want to say thank you and for the presentation today. I'm the liaison the alternate liaison you never see on Friday mornings because it's just a miserable day for me. But I so appreciate your efforts. I'm really old, and I think I've only lived out of sight of the water 6 years of my life. So I have a connection to wanting that sand between my toes and being able to do it. And so, totally off on a tangent, I get fed every morning on my Flipboard aggregator exactly what it wants to send me. And so last week I saw a UN report that talks about the loss of sand globally, that it's, other than water, the highest traded commodity in the world. Like, what is happening to the world, right? When sand reaches that level, and it's out of control in the way it's being used in third world countries attempting to becoming first world countries, because of course it's going into glass, concrete construction projects and all these little things we're holding that have silicon-based items in it. And it's just amazing to me that, that's another component to have to worry about as it's being literally excavated around the world, and we don't even know it, and we're just trying to hang on to our little slices, and when does that really become an issue here also? So just an interesting tangent, but thank you so much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Notice, Mr. Clerk, we have no comment online, right? Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I just always love when Beacon is able to come up here and just Beacon in general. Appreciate your presentation today, Mr. Baylor, and working with you as the City of Santa Barbara rep. And I also appreciate you referencing Naomi Schwartz and John Flynn. As most of you know, I worked for Naomi Schwartz starting 20 years ago, and about 20 years ago, and one of my first assignments that she had me do was to go with her down to Carpinteria for the Beacon meetings and just take notes. So it's been really rewarding to be able to be a member of Beacon after serving under Naomi and Salud Carbajal when he was the county supervisor for all those years, and having that memory of seeing where Beacon's come. And just a few other things I just wanted to raise is that Beacon is being seen more and more as a statewide model for regional cooperation, because there aren't a lot of areas in the state that have the regional dedication to coastal issues that we have. We're one of the only, if not the only one, that works like this. And so in my involvement through the League of Cities and the Coastal Cities Group and the committee that we're working with the Coastal Commission on these issues, Beacon has been really informative for us. And I know the Coastal Commission staff really values Beacon, and the state legislature itself is looking towards regional solutions and regional planning opportunities for addressing sea level rise adaptation. And so Beacon is constantly referenced as a model to look at. And every jurisdiction is different throughout the state, but Beacon is definitely getting some eyes and ears from a larger perspective than just our county. And with that, we've really enhanced the ability of Beacon to produce that over the last couple of years. We always had a volunteer executive director, but now we have Mr. Baylor, professional director. We have the science advisory team to really help our communities with it. And so it just really is meeting a large need that we have. And so really just want to thank you and the opportunity to tell Beacon's story. And I always learn something new every time I see it. So thank you, Mr. Baylor.
Welcome. Thank you all. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Baylor. Appreciate the presentation. And with that, we'll go to council member committee assignment reports. Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. We, I think, almost all attended the annual police promotion, and congratulations to those promoted. We held our last Community Choice Energy meeting, and I attended the memorial for Ted McToldridge, who is the director of the Santa Barbara Zoo for decades and built many of those exhibits, and family friend, and it was well attended, and just to celebrate his life.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I attended the chamber event along with many of you in the State of the City and saw all three mayors coming together. I think it was a great first time being able to do that. I found it very informative, and it was great for all three cities to come together. And I think your joke, Mr. Mayor, had the biggest groan in the beginning, but I won't repeat it. But thank you for your comedy there, but also just sharing with us, the community, what we're doing. So. Also attended the Community Choice Energy Subcommittee, the police promotions, and then on the League of City, the Environmental Quality Committee met, and we actually voted to recommend to the full League of Cities board, executive board support for the upcoming ballot and measure on this year's ballot for the sustainable plastics and recycling, and putting a fee on single-use plastics to go into recycling efforts, including 20% of that would go to local governments to help us. So it's not, it has qualified as I understand it, but right now it looks like it will be on the ballot later this year. So we did vote to approve that. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, the Blue Blazer got some work out this weekend. On Friday, I planted a tree at the Elings Park on behalf of Arbor Day. And then Saturday and Sunday were all Gaucho reunions, but for me, there were two memorials, one of Don Bernstein, the sports information director during the Gaucho heyday. Another one was a friend to the community and all the sporting world, as well as Elings Park, was Mike Warren, and that was on Sunday, his passing. So, and with that, we are adjourned, and we are going to adjourn back to and finish up our continued closed session. There'll be no report out.